All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined today by Jay Przekurat. Jay, before we get into some of the really cool stuff you've had going on, and we're obviously going to talk about drop shots a little bit here later, but first, when I first saw your name on the Elite Series roster, I had to look up like 4 times videos of other people pronouncing your name, so I didn't absolutely butcher it. Like, I knew someone was going to ask me, like, hey, have you heard about this new rookie guy? Like, yeah, Jay Przekurat. Like, what's the weirdest pronunciation you've probably heard of your name so far?
Oh yeah, pretty much like Przekurat or Przekurat. Przekurat, is that how you say it? No, it actually starts with an S, kind of. No.
Well, it's becoming a name that a lot of people are going to get a lot more familiar with. So you're obviously a rookie on the Elite Series this year. You're like, what, 23, 24, something like that?
23. Yeah.
23. So not only a rookie in the sense of new to the Elite Series, but I mean, young for an Elite Series rookie too, for making your way up that quickly. So aside from the crazy couple weeks that we'll talk about here in a minute, how has that transition been so far from Opens to the Elite Series?
Yeah, the Elite Series is like a level of competition that I didn't really understand it until I actually started fishing in the Elite Series. And like, I knew the Opens was like competitive, and like there's a lot of really good sticks in the Opens, and there's also some Elite Series fishermen that fish the Opens too. But when you put these 90 to 100 guys in an Elite Series field and then put them on a body of water where, like, take for example, like a Pickwick Lake, like when we went ledge fishing, the competition is absolutely insane. Like, I almost felt like every spot was found in the first like 8 hours of practice. Like, these guys, they literally idle everything, and like there's no, with the electronics we have nowadays, there's no secrets or anything like that. So yeah, it's pretty insane.
Yeah, so like my day job, I work for a minor league baseball team, so I see that too often, where it's like you have a lot of these guys that were like untouchable in high school and even college, and then they get to the big leagues and they're like, oh my goodness, like not only am I not the best person in the room anymore, but I'm like, I got to work my way up here. I'm like not even close. Is there a little bit of that feeling, like where you're like, all right, I was a stick locally, I was a stick, I could go out on the Opens and hold my own, and then it's like, how quick was that adjustment where you were like, okay, I feel like I belong here versus an outsider just trying to prove yourself and your name there?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely an adjustment. I mean, I still feel like I'm kind of like the underperson or the underdog in a way. Like, I still have a lot of learning to do, and I'm still super young. Like, these guys have experience on these lakes for 20 plus years, and there's nothing you can do, like personally to make that up just fishing there, say, for your first time. So yeah, there's definitely that underdog factor for sure.
You made a good point there, right? That there's guys that have probably been fishing Pickwick longer than you've been alive, like actually. But that might work in your favor too a little bit, because a lot of times, I mean, we've seen it where like fishing has changed so much in the past, even 5 to 10 years, but especially 20 to 30 years, where I think some of those older guys get stuck in their way a little bit and they're a little harder to adapt, where you're coming in with like a fresh set of eyes and a fresh set of like, all right, I know that I can't ignore the electronics and this aspect of things and things like that. So I think there might be like, it's like when you take your buddy fishing to a new place for the first time that too well, and they go and they like hit spots that you are like, oh, that spot's trash. And like, no, they pull up like a 5-6 pounder. Like, all right, fresh set of eyes always does good here.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect point. I mean, take, for example, when I just went to the St. Lawrence, I had never been there in my entire life. And, to be able to do what I did against the guys that have been fishing out there since they were 5 years old. Yeah, you put that into consideration, and it definitely does help.
So coming up through the Opens and now obviously on the Elite Series this year, what changes like the second that you become qualified for the Elite Series? Like from an angler perspective, is it like just crazy people, that you couldn't get a conversation with before that now approach you? Or like, do you have your sponsors all set up? Like what changes the second where someone, sends you that email or that call or whatever? It's like, hey, you're an Elite Series angler next year.
What changes is you have a lot more money you have to pay forward right away. Right. And then, but no, other than the changes for that, I mean, the sponsor game definitely gets better just because you have that title under your belt that you're an Elite Series angler. That obviously helps. It's obviously not, when you're going into it in your rookie year, it's different though, because you haven't really proved yourself.
Right.
That's one thing everyone says is you can make the Elite Series, but you have to prove yourself on the Elite Series to get that, that sponsor recognition and get all that stuff that these guys have had for years and years. Yeah, so I mean, that's the biggest thing. And then talking to people wise, I don't think that really changed much. I mean, you could always talk to any of the anglers you wanted to, even in the opens. Most of those guys are super nice, and you can talk to them, even if you're not, an Elite Series guy.
You made the point there too that obviously the cost goes up. That's one thing I think a lot of people don't, at least casual fan, or maybe introductory fan, doesn't realize is like the grueling financial side of even being an Elite Series angler. Right? You've probably got, I don't know the exact number. It's got to be like $40,000 to $50,000 just in entry fees, I'm assuming, for the Elite Series. And then you've got the travel, the expenses on room and boarding. That's why I see a lot of guys towing fifth wheels and stuff like that. So can you give us a little glimpse in like life on the road and what that really looks like versus what I think a lot of people have a perception of?
Yeah, I mean, life on the road, it's not fun. It really isn't. I mean, unless you're super into it and like you like being by yourself and you like the traveling part of things. Being from Wisconsin, I mean, I have to travel a long ways. I mean, I think my shortest trip this year is like 9 or 10 hours just to one of our tournaments. So I mean, excluding lacrosse, which is close, but I mean, all the rest of the tournaments are 10+ hour drives, with the gas prices nowadays and food and hotels and lodging and everything. I mean, once you get to the place, I mean, you got to get a fishing license. You got to put gas in your boat. Once every day of practice, there's so many things that go into it. And, the only way I look at it is you have to put more in to get more out. So basically, to win a tournament, you have to put as much in as you can. And it's basically gambling at that point, just from a tournament side of things, without sponsor help and stuff like that. It really is gambling, and you put it, as much as you can in to get as much as you can out. And sometimes it does work out in your favor.
Well, and on that side of things too, right? There's no guarantee, and you do really have to go all in. How do you feel about, obviously the hot topic a couple weeks ago was Bassmaster saying, hey, to qualify for the elites now, it's fishing all 9 opens and making that commitment. How do you feel personally, obviously going through both sides of that? Do you think that's a good decision for the sport and long-term and for the anglers, or do you think it kneecaps a lot of people?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it from my perspective because I qualified through just fishing 3 tournaments. So I can see both sides of the story there. I can see the person that, doesn't have the funding to fish all 9. But looking at it in a long-term point of view, I mean, you have to be putting yourself all the way out there 100%. Like if I wanted to qualify, I would have fished all 9 without a doubt. And like I would have tried to figure out the sponsor help and tried to figure out that whole deal because fishing the Elite Series was something that I wanted to do. So I was going to try and do it. And it also puts the ball in the sponsor's court. You're more of an asset to them at this point now because you're fishing 9 tournaments instead of just 3. So you kind of get, there's help there. I mean, there's a lot of positives and negatives to it, but I would think there's more positive to it in my opinion.
Well, I got an argument with someone till I was blue in the face about this. Like I like the move to say, hey, if you want to be a professional angler and you need to put it all on the line, this is not something you just get to do like, 2 or 3 weekends a year, when you're not busy and it's convenient and local to you, and then you can hit the lottery and make it to the Elite Series. And then you're also going to have these guys where it's like, I would assume you're going to have less people fizzle out after year 1 because they just can't cut it and they don't have the finances, they don't have everything set in place. Like you do see a lot of that sometimes where these guys will kind of like jackpot their way in and then they're not going to stay there for 20 years because it wasn't the goal they were chasing. There's no other sport where you can just like go out on 2 weekends a year and make it to the NBA or the NFL, or it's the same thing. You have to want to risk it all. And I think in the end, that's probably going to be better for the sport, but what do I know? Some kid from Southern Ohio, but, so when did you decide, or when did you know that you wanted to go down the professional angling route? Like at what point did that turn in your mind?
Probably when I started fishing team tournaments, which was like when I was 17, 18, and I started winning locally. And, I just got a taste into the whole tournament scene pretty heavily, and I had quite a bit of success. So it was like, I really want to start doing this outside of where I live right now. And then I went into the co-angler deal and then the boater and made the Elite Series.
Was there any point you second guessed yourself where like, was there a point where you're like, this might not be working out? Because you've had success pretty much the whole way.
Yeah, there might have been like a couple snippets of time, like when you're fishing as a boater on the opens and like say you take, because in reality, in that tournament trail, you're not really on it to make money. So, I mean, realistically, you're not. I mean, looking at the expenses nowadays, even if you cash a check, you're kind of pretty much breaking even if you're from somewhere that's 20 hours away. So, I mean, looking at it from that way, I'm like, man, like, if this doesn't work out, like if I don't qualify in a long period of time, like, there was always that thought of I'm going to have to do something else. And there was always that thought before I even started fishing as a boater.
Obviously, the talk of the town right now in Bassmaster 2 is that there was a rookie kid that went to the St. Lawrence River and put up a Centruy Belt and broke a record that's never been broken before, which is 100 pounds in a smallmouth tournament. So I'm not going to ask you like the cliche questions of like, how did that feel? And what was that? I know you've answered that a billion times by now, but I'm curious of like what meant more to you. Did it mean more to hold your first blue trophy, or did it mean more to you to break a record that's been, not eclipsed for so long and be the first person to do that? Which one did you look back on and you're like, all right, that meant more to me?
Definitely the blue trophy. I mean, that's all I've seen my whole life growing up. Like the Century Belt was really just a bonus to me at the time because I didn't know if it was going to happen. And it was on my mind, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I wanted to win way more than 100 pounds.
So how heavy is that trophy? Because we've heard people talk about before, like we had, I think it was Gussie last year wrote an article about literally how heavy that trophy is. We saw Taku, obviously. So how was there anybody in your mind, like in the back of your mind, where like, don't drop this, kid, don't drop this, like this is your photo shot?
When I was sitting in the weigh-in line, and after Corey weighed in, I knew I was going to win, and he was whatever he was the third guy, so I was still in the weigh-in. And after he weighed in, and then I thought about Taku, I'm like, yeah, he could barely even hold that thing up. And then I was like, oh, I got it. Like, it'll be fine. Like, I got a hold of it, and I'm like, this sucker. I lifted it up, pretty not easily, but I got it up there. And if I had to guesstimate it, it's somewhere between 40 and 60 pounds.
Whoa. I wouldn't have guessed that. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, I knew it was heavy because like you see guys that are in fairly good shape. Like you can see that little wince at the very beginning where a lot of guys will pick it up for the first time. They're like, I'm going to shove this thing over my head. The confetti's going, and they kind of buckle a little bit. Like, okay, I got to really put my big boy pants on. This is not 5 pounds.
Yeah. I would say it's probably like 45 pounds, somewhere in there.
Jeez. Yeah. That's cool. So I want to learn a little bit more too about, because I don't know too much about your past and your history. I know a little bit, obviously. So growing up, and when you grew up and you decided like, all right, we're going to do the fishing thing, I think it was probably a little easier for you because your dad is an absolute walleye stick. So where did you cut your teeth growing up fishing? Was it like lakes and rivers and or ponds or creeks, or where was it where you learned?
Yeah, it was a river. I live on the Wisconsin River, which there's like several sections of the Wisconsin River. They're all dammed off, and I have I'm fortunate enough to have 3 or 4 actually pretty close to the house that I always fish. Yeah, so I grew up river fishing for both species. I grew up fishing for walleyes and bass, mostly bass, but yeah, river fishing was my deal. And then our fun trips would always be up north, which we call it up north. It's like 2 hours north of me, where there's thousands of lakes up there that you can go fish for, smallmouth and clear water and flowages and a bunch of different things. So that's how I cut my teeth when growing up fishing. So
at what point did you make the conscious decision to go bass? Like, was that like a conversation with you and your dad of like, hey, because I mean, there's more opportunity, I feel like, in bass fishing, obviously, but up in Wisconsin, walleye fishing is a big deal.
It is. That was also the time, though, that bass fishing really took off. The whole high school deal, college, and then like our team tournament opportunities were so big at that time for bass fishing. And then probably a lot of people don't know this either, but whenever me and my dad would go fishing for fun, when he wasn't tournament fishing, we would bass fish. So he basically kind of led me down the path to begin. Like, you need to go in this direction.
So obviously this is tackle talk. We like to talk tackle. We like to talk techniques, and, leave somebody with something that they can learn. They can go out and they can, try a technique, and they say, hey, I learned this tip from Jay Przekurat, right? It's the cool part about this. So what we're going to talk about today is probably the easiest decision that anybody right now in bass fishing can make is let's talk with Jay Przekurat about drop shotting. You basically, a weekend, 2 weekends ago, you made everybody in America want to go outside, pick up a drop shot, and go lean on some smallmouth down deep. So for starters with the drop shot, let's start with the absolute basics of it, because I'll be completely honest, we've talked about this on the show before, is that I don't, and it sounds weird coming from a Midwestern guy, I don't throw a drop shot too much because all of our rivers and lakes and everything around here are so dirty that it's not a technique that plays a lot around here, but it's something I'm always interested in because it looks so fun. I love the idea of being vertical on a fish versus around here, it's a lot of, the length of your cast and retrieve versus actually, being up on a fish and marking it and pulling it up. So let's start with the basics. Let's start with rod, reel, and line. What's your absolute ideal drop shot setup when it comes to rod, reel, and line with specifics?
Sure. So rod, anything from a 6'10" to a 7-foot rod for a drop shot. Okay. If you want to go more specific, I use Lew's products, Mark Zona's signature series spinning rod, and then spinning reel, similar, anything in a 2,000 to a 3,000 size. And then I use 10-pound braid generally to a 8-pound or a 6-pound leader. Now that goes back and forth. I'll also go up to 10 and 12. It really just depends on, like, for instance, at the St. Lawrence, I always use an 8-pound leader line, which leader line is the fluorocarbon that you attach to your braided line for the invisibility factor. And those are my, main three. I'm a 6'10" rod kind of guy just because I'm a little bit shorter. And we can't use a net, so it's a little bit easier to land the fish on the side of the boat with a shorter rod. So that's why.
So when you're talking about your leader choice there too, obviously, I'm assuming the only reason you would bump from a 8 to 10 to anything around there would be strictly because of visibility, right? There's nothing else in there that goes into that factor of like, all right, I'm going to bump down 2 or 4 pound test. It's got to be just how clear the water is, I'm assuming.
It's basically just on how the fish are reacting. The smallest leader line size I'll go down to is 6 pound. That's the smallest I've ever gone down to. I mean,
that's light.
You could go down smaller, but you're playing fire at that point. I mean, then you're ice fishing or something. But generally all around line size for leader is 8 or 10 pound.
Okay. Is there any scenario where you'll go away from that 6'10"?
There is, like at the St. Lawrence, I was using all 8-pound just because I had the confidence in it and I thought it could get me, a couple more bites than maybe the 10-pound because they were getting a little bit skittish. Now, for instance, we go to Lake Oahe in a few weeks. I might be using more 10-pound there because those fish haven't seen baits, near as often, and they might be a little bit easier to catch, so I can get away with something a little bit heavier. And then also when you're weeding through so many fish in a day, you don't want to be using super light line. There's just more odds for, breaking off, or say you want to get a small fish in quick and swing it in the boat. A little bit heavier leader goes a long ways.
So what about baits? So I know you're a Strike King guy, obviously, and you were throwing that little Strike King half shell, I think. I saw the pictures.
Yep.
And it looked like, it's just regular green pumpkin, right? I think the one that you were holding up, or was it like the green pumpkin purple?
Yeah.
So what is it about that little half shell that you think makes it so deadly? Why do you gravitate toward that?
It's just so subtle. I like drop shot baits that don't have a lot of action. Things that just lay on the bottom and they almost lay horizontal to where they don't even move. I mean, you can move it with your rod and obviously you get a little bit of action and something in there, but something about a bait that sits in front of a fish's face and like barely moves, and every once in a while, like it gets a little bit of life into it, like a minnow would if it was injured. Like it just moves a little bit and then it kind of just lays there. I think they like a lot. And then, like you said, the half shell is one of my favorites. I use all sorts of colors in that. And then my other favorite bait is a Strike King Z2, which is like a minnow style of drop shot bait. It's actually called the Baby Z2, and I use various different colors in that. It just depends on what the bait fish looks like. But that one has a little bit more action in the tail. I go back and forth. I mean, half shell, I would say, is more for gobies and crawfish. Z2 is more for bait fish.
Is there any situation where you'll use something with, because like the The Z2, I think, has the fork tail, right? I think it's the one that's got the split tail there. Is there any situation that you'll go to something that's what I think of when I think of like stereotypical drop shot bait is like a dream shot or something, right? Just that profile of like that little bulbous body slims down and then it kind of has that teardrop tail again. Is there any situation where you'll go to something like that?
Yeah, I do use that bait a decent amount too. That just gets, it depends on if I'm not like, if it's very rare that you're not catching them on, especially with smallmouth. It's rare that you're not catching them on a half shell or a Z2. Yeah. So it's more of just a confidence thing for me. But I do throw the dream shot a decent amount too, and that is a good straight tail worm for a drop shot.
That was what I was going to ask too. With a drop shot, when you're, because I mean, the closest thing I probably have to mean St. Lawrence River smallmouth is like small farm creek smallmouth that you wade back 3 miles and they haven't seen a lure in 5 years, and it's just like they're just full of like piss and vinegar, and there's nothing you can do about it. You could probably put any profile in front of them that looks somewhat natural, and they're going to go up and smack the crap out of it and try and kill it. So how much of that do you think is just finding a bait that you're confident in and finding a bait that how it looks under the water, how to work it, versus really getting caught up in like, oh, this one has, a 0.25 inches more on the tail that's a little bit more subtle than this one?
Yeah, that's everything. Confidence in a bait that you can throw at like any body of water on a drop shot is like everything. Like I'll use that same bait and go to or like that Z2 for instance, and go to a largemouth fishery in the grass and catch largemouths on it too. It's just, I don't know, something about like the way it works and just how to rig it. It just never changes, and you just always have the confidence that when you put it in front of one, the odds of you getting bit on it are pretty good.
So if you close your eyes and someone's like, hey, your ideal drop shot like conditions or body of water, depth, things like that, when you think of drop shot, what do you think of like this is where the epitome of where you should throw a drop shot?
Yeah, like it would have to be middle of summer, wind about like 5 to 10 miles an hour. So there's a little bit of ripple on the water, and then you're drop shotting anywhere from 15 to 25 feet, or you can go deeper, but my ideal depth would be like that 18-foot range where you're not like letting out tons and tons of line to get down to the bottom, and you can still get away with a little bit lighter drop shot weight. That would be my ideal drop shot conditions.
So I know I hinted earlier, it's like around here I think people gravitate more toward like finesse jigs, Neds, things like that, just because again our water clarity sucks, to just put it simply. Do you have any confidence in a drop shot in like murky water?
I do. Yeah, I have in the past. We have some like flowages up by us that are pretty dirty, and I do catch them on a drop shot up there. It has its time and place. I mean, I feel like a drop shot is really the most effective for smallmouth, in my opinion, just because if you put that in front of a smallmouth's face, 9 times out of 10, he's probably going to bite it if he's, not spooky or whatever he's doing. Yeah, that's just my personal opinion on it. Whereas a largemouth, you might have to change it up and do some other tactics to actually get that fish to bite.
So the other thing about drop shots, I think that probably intimidates a lot of people is like you think of drop shotting as being on a boat, and marking a fish, and then you're marking a spot that you're going to be fishing, or a school or something like that, a flat, and then you're going to drop down, and you have to be vertical on these fish to properly drop shot them, where you've got, people are listening to this, right, that just were bank fishermen or wading or things like that, where a drop shot just seems to be tougher because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that angle of your line, like if you're making a fan cast out 50 yards and you're trying to throw a drop shot, your weight is over here and then your bait is over here versus being right vertical on itself. Is there a way to effectively fish a drop shot from a distance with your line that angled, or is it really something you got to be like up above these fish and be a little bit more vertical?
You don't have to. That's one thing people mistake quite a bit. I catch a lot of fish on a drop shot casting it actually, a decent ways. The only thing that I'll change when I'm doing that is just the size of my lead between my hook and my weight. So if you're a long ways, you want a longer lead between your hook and your weight, because then it'll keep your bait up off the bottom more and things like that. But, I mean, if you're taking bomb casts with a drop shot, it's probably not the ideal situation. But anywhere in that, like, I keep a rule of thumb, like anywhere past 60 or 70 feet in front of the boat is probably too far. That like 60, 70 foot range is about the limit for me with a drop shot.
So if we want to back up a couple weeks on the St. Lawrence River, you're obviously electronics play a big role in what you're able to do on a fishery like that and be able to put up the kind of weight that you can. And there's a lot of folks on here that are probably listening. Some of them have that technology. Some of them don't, but are genuinely curious about how you use that, to your advantage to have a successful tournament. Can you explain from like beginning of practice to, final Sunday, what your process is with those electronics and finding those fish or identifying the areas that you're saying, yes, all right, this is where I'm going to be throwing my drop shot?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, so take St. Lawrence, for example, Lake Ontario. You're looking for big boulders and you're looking for bait. You're looking for basically two recipes for smallmouth bass, big rocks and bait fish. That's the two main. I mean, if you find both, you're going to find bass. And that was my mindset going into it. And I happened to stumble on this it really was a magical spot. There was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of smallmouths there. I don't know how many there actually were on that spot, but it was nuts. It was the most bass I've ever seen in my life. And when I found the spot, I found the fish on forward-facing sonar, which everyone's familiar with that nowadays. Everyone's using it. And, and it really is like a game changer in my opinion, because, back, I didn't even have forward-facing sonar 2 years ago when I was fishing as a co-angler. And like the first time I had it was when I fished as a boater, and that was last year. So this is my first time ever with forward-facing sonar. So to see where it's come and to see how much it's already changed the game is pretty crazy. But I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, there's still a lot of fish out there that did not bite, even though you saw them on the forward-facing sonar. I think on day 2, I had 50 fish follow my bait, and 1 out of every 50 fish would bite. So, I mean, it just puts the odds in your favor when you throw it in front of enough fish in a day, to get a bite and things like that. But yeah, that was my mindset. Rocks, bait fish. If I saw them on my side scan, big rocks, it was harder to see the bait fish, but if I saw the rocks, I'd put my forward-facing sonar in. And then when I saw the bait fish suspended, you could see the bass chasing them around. And then eventually, if you casted enough bass, you could get one to bite.
When you marked that school for the first time, did you, in the back of your mind, like that could be a winning school fish right there? Like, do you know that?
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was a good school of fish. I did not think it would be the winning school of fish because I didn't know, like, if they'd move. This was still 2 days prior to the first day of the tournament. So, and we were going to have a blow day on the third day of practice, which I never did make it back out to the lake. So, yeah, I mean, it was up in the air. But after day 2 was done, that's when I realized that it was the winning school of fish.
That's awesome. So I know you're busy. Last question here. A lot of folks are going to listen to this and they're going to say, all right, I do want to go out and I want to try drop shots for the first time. It is a technique where I would maybe make the argument it's one of the few techniques with a spinning rod that you do kind of need like a specialized setup versus just like an all-around 7-foot medium that you can go out with and throw most things. If someone's looking for like the one question we get all the time is budget-friendly combos. Like if you have a budget-friendly combo that you can start somebody out with for drop shotting, what are you going to steer them toward?
Yeah, anything in the loose lineup that's either from the Mark Zona spinning rod, that's honestly a pretty affordable series of rods down the line. Like any of them in the Mock series, like anything in the loose lineup is really, they have some really affordable stuff. And then their spinning reels, like they're coming out with some good stuff here this upcoming fall. Actually, the new reel that I was using was the Custom Light, and that's actually, like, for the industry right now, that's a pretty affordable spinning reel. I think it's going to be in like the $129 range, $129. Yeah. For a good spinning reel, I mean, that's a dang good price. And they also do make some great spinning reels that are just below that. So anything in the loose lineup, they're super, angler friendly for pricing wise. And I would steer people that way for sure.
Well, before we let you go, is there anywhere you'd like to direct folks if they want to keep up with what you're doing this year on the Elite Series and then hopefully for 10, 20, 30, 40 years to come?
Yeah, so right now I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Both of them are just my name. And on Instagram, it's actually just the letter J and then my full last name on Instagram. And that's where I try and keep up with most things right now. everything that's been going on. And I just got 2 tournaments left this season. So hopefully I can just finish the year strong.
That's awesome. Well, we wish you the best of luck. We're all rooting for you. Looking forward to seeing you out there the rest of the season. That is Mr. Jay Przekurat. Jay, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.